Emma Collins stood quietly in the hallway of the sprawling Carter estate, clutching her small notepad to her chest like a shield. Her plain grey sweater and sensible flats blended into the soft cream walls, making her nearly invisible to the hurried staff that bustled past. But her mind was anything but invisible. It was sharp, observant, and had been troubled by a single thought all day. When she finally gathered the courage to approach Ethan Carter's home office, she found him hunched over his laptop, the glow of the screen highlighting the worry lines around his eyes. The billionaire CEO of Carter Tech was known for his brilliance and his steely control, but in that moment, Emma saw the human side that still believed in trust. She hesitated at the door before stepping closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Carter," she said, her heart pounding, I think there's a camera in your office, and I don't think it's yours. Before you skip ahead, trust me. You're going to want to see how this unfolds. This is the story of betrayal, resilience, and the strength we find when we least expect it. Stay with us to the very end and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Leave us a comment below. Where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? Because trust me, by the time we're done, you'll never look at loyalty the same way again. Emma Collins had only been working for Carter Tech for 3 months, but she'd already memorized every inch of the company's labyrinthine headquarters and every line of its founder's face. Ethan Carter was a legend in the world of cybersecurity. A self-made billionaire who'd built his empire with nothing but his own code and an unshakable vision. His name was synonymous with impenetrable firewalls and unbreakable encryption, yet behind those steely grey eyes, Emma sometimes glimpsed a vulnerability he hid from the world. She'd joined the team as a temporary assistant after the sudden resignation of his longtime executive aide. On her first day, Ethan had barely looked at her. He'd simply given her a stack of files and a curt nod, his mind already lost in the tangle of code and strategy that filled his days. Emma didn't take it personally. She'd grown up learning that the loudest voices rarely had the most to say. She was comfortable on the edges, where she could watch and learn. What she hadn't expected was how quickly she'd learned to read Ethan's moods. The way his jaw tightened when he was deep in thought, the way his fingers drummed against the polished mahogany desk when a problem eluded him. She noticed things others overlooked, like the way Vanessa Monroe, Ethan's fiancée, always seemed to arrive just before an important meeting, armed with coffee and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Vanessa was everything Emma was not: elegant, poised, the perfect match for a man like Ethan. She moved through the office with the confidence of someone who'd already won, her designer heels clicking across the marble floors like punctuation marks. She knew everyone's name, their birthdays, their children's hobbies, and she wielded that knowledge like a weapon. Emma, by contrast, was plain. She wore her hair in a simple ponytail, her clothes practical rather than fashionable. She blended into the background, which suited her just fine. She was here to do her job, not to impress anyone. But it was precisely that invisibility that had allowed her to notice the small, strange details. The tiny blinking light behind the ornate painting Vanessa had insisted on hanging in Ethan's office. The faint hum in the walls whenever Vanessa lingered too long near the network hub. Ethan, for his part, had no idea that Emma had been quietly watching, had been quietly protecting him from something he hadn't even known was a threat. Until now. Until she'd found the courage to step into his office and whisper the words that might change everything. Emma stood just inside the doorway of Ethan's office, her fingers still trembling from the words she'd just spoken. She'd expected disbelief, maybe even anger. But instead, Ethan's gaze flickered up from his laptop screen, sharp and focused in a way that made her heart skip a beat. "A camera?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that seemed to fill the room. "Where?" She took a cautious step closer, pointing toward the large, gold-framed painting that hung above the bookshelf. It was a romantic landscape Vanessa had insisted on: rolling hills, a perfect blue sky, and a single tree that looked suspiciously out of place. Emma had thought it was garish from the start. "Behind that," she said quietly, "I noticed a faint red blink late last night when I was updating the conference schedule on the network. I've seen devices like that before, tiny pinhole cameras that can be hidden anywhere. It's broadcasting, Ethan." He stared at the painting, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Emma wondered if she'd overstepped. After all, she was just an assistante temp at that. But then Ethan exhaled, the tension in his shoulders shifting ever so slightly as he rose from his chair. "Show me," he said. Emma moved carefully around the desk, her steps slow and deliberate, as though approaching a dangerous animal. She'd always felt out of place in this rumor-cavernous space, with towering windows and polished wood that smelled faintly of cedar and success. She'd never thought she'd be here giving the CEO of Carter Tech a crash course in corporate espionage. Standing beside him, she reached for the edge of the painting and gently lifted it from the hook. Behind it, hidden in the shadows, a tiny black lens glinted at them like an unblinking eye. Ethan's breath caught. "Son of a," he muttered, his fingers flexing into fists. He leaned in, inspecting the device with a mixture of disbelief and dawning fury. "Vanessa gave me this painting," he said hoarsely, more to himself than to Emma. Emma nodded, her own heart sinking. "I thought so," she whispered. "And it's not connected to your network. I ran a scan. It's broadcasting on an encrypted frequency, but not through our system. That means someone's watching from the outside." He turned to face her then, his grey eyes stormy with anger and confusion. "How long have you known?" She swallowed, forcing herself to hold his gaze. "Just a few days. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. I'm sorry, Ethan. I know how much you trust her." His jaw clenched, and for a moment she thought he might shout. But then he closed his eyes, a slow, shuddering breath escaping his lips. When he opened them again, they were hard as steel. "Don't apologize," he said. "You did the right thing." The air in Ethan's office felt heavy, charged with a tension neither of them could name. Emma watched as he lowered the painting, carefully setting it aside on the floor. The small black camera lens glared back at them like an accusation. Emma's pulse quickened. "I can show you the data," she said, her voice stronger now. She crossed the room to the side table where she'd left her tablet, the device looking small and out of place amidst the polished wood and gleaming screens. Ethan followed her, his eyes fixed on the tablet as though it might hold the answer to every question that had been building in his mind. She unlocked it with a quick swipe, her fingers steady despite the rapid beat of her heart. "I started noticing odd spikes in the network traffic," she began, scrolling through logs filled with numbers and graphs. "At first, I thought it was just background noise, maybe a device glitching or an external scan. But then I realized these spikes coincided with times Vanessa was here alone, or when you were out." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What kind of spikes?" Emma tapped an icon, and the screen filled with a network map of the house. "Look here," she said, pointing at a cluster of red dots that pulsed ominously in the living room and his office. "Those signals aren't on our secure network. They're separate, like they're piggybacking on your Wi-Fi without actually joining it. It's sophisticated, like something designed to hide itself." Ethan's expression darkened. "How did I miss this?" Emma hesitated, then gave him a small, sad smile. "Because you trusted her. Because she's good at pretending, but She took a breath. "I grew up around people who lied. People who said they cared, but always had another motive. I learned to watch, to listen, to notice the details that didn't fit." He looked at her then, really looked at her. For the first time since she'd walked into his office that day, she felt seen, not just as an assistant but as someone who mattered. "You're saying she's been spying on me," he said, his voice low. Emma nodded. "I think she's working with someone else too. I've seen her meet with Jason Reynolds a few times, always when you were out. They talk in hushed voices, and she always looks over her shoulder." "Jason," Ethan muttered, his tone tinged with disbelief and hurt. Jason had been his CFO since the company's inception, a man he'd trusted with everything from payroll to high-level security clearances. The idea that Jason might be involved felt like a physical blow. He pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to process the tangled web of betrayal. Emma watched him, her own heart aching. She knew what it felt like to be deceived by people you thought you could trust. Finally, Ethan straightened, his jaw set. "We're not letting this slide," he said. I need to know exactly what she's been doing and why. Emma nodded. I can help you trace the data. I can find out where those signals are going. But Ethan, she hesitated. You need to be ready for what we might find. He met her eyes. And for the first time, there was no distance between them, no hierarchy, no titles. Just two people facing an impossible truth together. Show me, he said, his voice calm but resolute. Let's find out who she really is. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of the Carter estate, painting long shadows on the polished floors. Ethan paced the length of his office, each step measured and deliberate, while Emma stood near the table with her tablet, her fingers deftly navigating through layers of encrypted data. He couldn't believe how quickly everything he thought he knew had unraveled. Vanessa, his fiancée, his supposed partner in everything, had installed a camera in his office. And Jason, his CFO and friend of nearly a decade, might be working with her. The betrayal burned in his chest. We need to be thorough, Ethan muttered, his voice tight with tension. If they're hiding cameras in here, who knows what else they've done? Emma nodded, determined. I think we should check the rest of the house. If they planted one camera, it's likely they've planted more, and we need to find them before they can do any more damage. Ethan hesitated, his gaze shifting to the old oak door that led to the main hallway. It felt like an invasion of his own sanctuary, but he knew she was right. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore, he was protecting his company, his staff. And, in a way he hadn't expected, Emma too. All right, he said. Let's start with the living room and the master bedroom. I'll get Mrs. Thompson to help us. He found the housekeeper in the kitchen, her grey hair pinned back in its usual neat bun. Mrs. Thompson had worked for his family since before his parents passed away. Her loyalty had been one of the few constants in his ever-shifting world. Mrs. Thompson, he began, his tone serious. We have a situation. I need your help. She looked up from her tea, her sharp eyes taking in the tension on his face. Of course, Mr. Carter. Tell me what you need. He explained everything: Vanessa's betrayal, the hidden cameras, and the possibility that Jason was involved. Mrs. Thompson listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable, but her eyes blazing with a quiet fury. That woman, she muttered under her breath. I knew there was something off about her, always snooping around the study when she thought no one was watching. Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He'd been so blind. We need to find every single device they've planted, Emma said, stepping forward. If we can gather them all, we'll have proof evidence we can take to the authorities. Mrs. Thompson stood, setting her tea aside with a decisive clink. Then let's get to work. Together, the three of them moved through the house like a well-trained team. Emma led the way with her tablet, scanning for unauthorized signals. Mrs. Thompson checked under furniture, behind paintings, even inside flower arrangements, anywhere a small device might be hidden. They found one in the living room, tucked inside the base of an ornate lamp Vanessa had insisted on buying. Another was concealed behind a row of books in the study, its blinking light so faint it was nearly invisible. The last one they found in the master bedroom, hidden in a jewelry box that had once belonged to Ethan's mother. Ethan's hands trembled as he held the tiny black devices, rage and sorrow mixing in his chest. Vanessa hadn't just spied on him, she'd invaded his memories, his private spaces, the very essence of his home. Emma met his gaze, her own eyes filled with determination. We have everything we need, she said. Now it's time to confront her. Evening had settled over the Carter estate like a shroud, the last traces of daylight fading into a dusky grey that matched the mood inside the house. Ethan stood in his living room, the evidence of Vanessa's betrayal laid out on the glass coffee table like a grim offering. The tiny black devices, they'd found a camera from his office, a microphone from the living room lamp, a tracker from the master bedroom H1, a testament to the woman he'd almost trusted with his entire life. Mrs. Thompson had retreated to the kitchen, giving him the space to do what needed to be done. Emma stood by the fireplace, her tablet clutched to her chest, eyes fixed on Ethan. She could feel the tension radiating off him like heat from a dying star. Vanessa arrived right on schedule. She'd texted earlier, promising to bring his favorite dinner and a bottle of his favorite wine like nothing had changed. She swept into the room, all charm and elegance, long blonde hair framing her perfect face, that same disarming smile that had made him believe she was different. "Darling," she purred, stepping forward to kiss his cheek. "Rough day?" Ethan didn't flinch, but his eyes were cold as ice. "Sit down," he said, his voice a low, controlled growl. Vanessa paused, the smile slipping ever so slightly. "Is something wrong?" Emma moved to stand behind Ethan, her presence like a silent shield. Vanessa's eyes flicked to the young assistant, a flash of annoyance crossing her features. "Emma?" she said, forcing a smile. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us." Emma said nothing, her gaze steady and unwavering. Ethan leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees. "I think you know why we're here," he said, his voice low. "I think you know exactly what you've been doing." Vanessa's eyes widened in practiced shock. "Ethan, too don't understand." He reached down and picked up the small camera from the coffee table, holding it between his thumb and forefinger like a poisonous spider. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. Her lips trembled. "What is that?" Emma stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "It's a camera, Vanessa. A camera hidden behind the painting you gave Ethan. It's been broadcasting to an encrypted network that's not part of this house. And that's not all. We found microphones, trackers evidence that you and Jason Reynolds have been spying on him, feeding confidential information to competitors." Vanessa's eyes darted between them, her face pale. That's insane. Jason is your friend, Ethan. And me? Spying on you? How could you even... Ethan's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with a mix of pain and fury. "I trusted you," he hissed. "I was going to ask you to be my wife." Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes, rolling down her flawless cheeks. "Ethan, please." For a moment, Ethan's resolve wavered. He'd loved this woman, or at least the version of her he'd wanted to believe in. Every memory they'd shared, every laugh, every late-night talk about their future, all of it felt like a lie. But in that moment, as he looked into her tear-streaked face, he heard Emma's voice in his head. "You need to be ready for what we might find." Emma stepped closer, her expression unwavering. "Ethan, look at me," she said. "Don't let her tears blind you to the truth." He turned to her, his breath ragged. Emma's brown eyes were steady, calm. "She's been playing you from the start," she said softly. "You know that now. Trust yourself. Trust the evidence." He looked at the devices on the table, at the data Emma had shown him, at the devastation on Vanessa's face. The puzzle pieces clicked together in a way that left no doubt. His jaw tightened. "Vanessa Monroe," he said, his voice cold and sharp, "I'm done being your fool." Vanessa's mask shattered, her face contorting into something ugly, something real. "You have no idea what you've started," she spat. "You think you can fight us? You're nothing without me." Ethan stood, his gaze steady. "We'll see about that." From the hallway came the sound of approaching footsteps, Mrs. Thompson, and behind her 2 uniformed FBI agents. Ethan met Vanessa's gaze one last time, his eyes hard. "It's over," he said. And just like that, the empire she'd tried to steal from him became the fortress he'd built to expose her. Vanessa's screams still echoed down the hallway long after the FBI agents escorted her out. The living room, so recently a battlefield of lies and betrayal, fell into a heavy, exhausted silence. Ethan stood by the fireplace, his shoulders slumped under the weight of too many truths revealed in too little time. Emma watched him from across the room, her heart aching at the sight of a man who'd built an empire only to see the foundation nearly torn apart by the very people he trusted most. She wanted to speak, to reassure him, but the words caught in her throat. Mrs. Thompson entered quietly, her wise eyes taking in the scene. She carried a small tray of teen-old habit from years of serving a family that had once been whole. She set it down on the table, the clink of porcelain the only sound. "You did the right thing, Mr. Carter," she said gently. "No one deserves to be betrayed like that." Ethan's eyes flickered with gratitude, but the pain was still there, raw and unfiltered. "Jason too," he muttered, his voice low and bitter. "I trusted him with everything. My company, my finances, my future. Emma moved closer, her steps hesitant but determined. Sometimes, she said softly, the people we trust most are the ones who know exactly how to hurt us. But that doesn't mean we stop trusting everyone. It means we learn to trust the ones who've proven they deserve it. Ethan turned to her then, and in his gaze, she saw the walls of suspicion and isolation he'd built around himself beginning to crumble. You, he said, his voice hoarse. I should have trusted you sooner. She shook her head, her expression gentle. You were protecting yourself. It's what we all do. Mrs. Thompson, standing beside the fireplace, added, Emma's right. You've always been the one taking care of others. Your company, your people, your family's legacy. But sometimes, you need to let someone take care of you too. The truth of those words sank deep, and Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He looked around at the two women who had become his lifelines in the midst of betrayal and chaos. I don't know what I would have done without you both, he admitted. I feel like I've been fighting alone for so long. Emma stepped forward, her brown eyes bright with empathy. You're not alone anymore, she said. We're here, and we're not going anywhere. A small, genuine smile touched Ethan's lips, the first in what felt like forever. He reached out and took Emma's hand, his grip firm but warm. Thank you, he whispered. For everything. Mrs. Thompson poured the tea, her movements practiced and comforting. Drink this, Mr. Carter, she said, her voice strong and unwavering. We've still got work to do. And in that moment, surrounded by two people who refused to let him fall, Ethan realized he had finally found the allies he'd been searching for all along. The following morning, the Carter estate felt different, lighter somehow, as though the walls themselves had exhaled a breath they'd been holding for too long. The security team had swept the entire property, ensuring every hidden device Vanessa and Jason had planted was removed. But even without the cameras, the house felt more transparent now, more honest, more like a home than a fortress. Ethan sat at the long oak dining table, a steaming mug of coffee cradled between his hands. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, highlighting the lines of exhaustion still etched into his face. Across from him, Emma was reviewing the final report on her tablet, her hair pulled back in its usual ponytail, eyes focused and calm. Mrs. Thompson bustled in with a plate of warm scones, setting it down with a gentle clatter. Eat something, she chided. You've barely slept, and you'll need your strength for what's coming next. Ethan offered her a small, tired smile. Thanks, Mrs. Thompson. I don't know what I'd do without you. The older woman smiled back, eyes soft but proud. You'd do just fine, but you'd miss the best scones in town. Emma chuckled, the sound like music after the chaos of the past few days. She set her tablet aside and looked at Ethan, her expression turning serious. The FBI has everything they need, she said. Vanessa and Jason are in custody, and they've already started unraveling the financial trails. Apex Industries won't be able to deny their involvement for long. Ethan nodded slowly, the weight of betrayal replaced by a simmering resolve. Good, he said. They thought they could destroy me, but they underestimated one thing. Emma raised an eyebrow. What's that? He met her gaze, his grey eyes unwavering. The people who stood by me, the people who refused to give up, even when I was too blind to see the truth. A blush crept into Emma's cheeks, but she held his gaze. You've always been a fighter, Ethan, she said softly. You just needed someone to remind you that you're not in this alone. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, sleek Devician advanced prototype security scanner, built with Emma's help. He slid it across the table toward her. I want you to have this, he said. You earned it. You spotted the signals I missed. You saved me from something I couldn't even see. Emma stared at the device, her eyes wide. Is this? It's yours, Ethan confirmed. Your ideas made this better than I could have imagined. I filed the patent in your name. You're the youngest lead designer Carter Tech has ever had. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, threatening to spill. She shook her head, overwhelmed. Ethan, I don't know what to say. He leaned forward, his voice steady but warm. Say you'll stay, he said. Say you'll keep working with me. I've learned that trust is earned, not given. And you've earned mine, Emma. 100 times over. Emma's smile trembled, but it was bright and genuine. I'd be honored, she whispered. Mrs. Thompson wiped a tear from the corner of her eye and clapped her hands. Well then, she said with a grin, it looks like we're finally a team. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Carter felt like he wasn't just building a company, he was building a family. The next few weeks unfolded with a quiet but determined energy that felt like a second chance. The Carter estate, once shadowed by betrayal and deceit, now buzzed with the hum of rebuilding. Every day, Ethan found himself discovering small ways the house had been transformed, not by Vanessa's manipulation, but by the resilience of the people who'd chosen to stand by him. He often found Emma in the study, collaborating with the cybersecurity team, her eyes alight with focus and purpose. The device she'd helped design, the same scanner that had exposed Vanessa's treachery, was already making waves in the industry. Orders were flooding in, and Carter Tech's reputation had not only survived but thrived. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan found himself standing on the back porch, watching the lights of the estate flicker to life. Emma joined him, her ponytail loose and her smile easy, as though the darkness that had threatened them all had finally lifted. Beautiful night, she said softly. He nodded, his eyes on the horizon. It is, and for the first time in a long time it actually feels safe. Emma leaned against the railing, her expression thoughtful. You know, I've been thinking a lot about trust, she said, about how it's not just given but built moment by moment, choice by choice. Ethan turned to her, his grey eyes serious but warm. You taught me that, he said. You showed me that trust is earned, that sometimes the people we least expect are the ones who save us when it matters most. Emma's cheeks colored, but she met his gaze with unwavering strength. And you showed me that even the most guarded hearts can learn to open up, that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who admit they need others. They stood in silence for a moment, the night air filled with the sound of crickets and the gentle rustle of leaves. Inside, Mrs. Thompson was humming softly in the kitchen, the smell of fresh scones wafting through the open windows, a small but steady reminder of home. Ethan reached for Emma's hand, his grip firm but gentle. I was thinking about starting something, he said. A foundation. Something that helps people who've been betrayed. People like me, like you. People who've been hurt by those they trusted. Emma's eyes widened. Like an outreach program? He nodded. Exactly. We'd call it the Emma Foundation, he said with a smile. Because without you, none of this would have been possible. Emma's breath caught, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she squeezed his hand, her smile radiant. I'd like that, she whispered. And in that quiet moment, beneath the stars and the hum of crickets, Ethan realized that his greatest victory hadn't been saving his company, it had been finding a family where he'd least expected it. A family built not on contracts or blood, but on trust, on courage, and on the unshakable bond between two people who'd refused to let the darkness win. Together, they stepped inside, the warmth of the house embracing them. And for the first time, Ethan knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together, one step, one choice, one unbreakable bond at a time.